I realised the title here is slightly different to the title that I advertised, and it's Emerging and Changing. This is what I call my sabbatical. I had a sabbatical between 2015 and 2016. And then I've got a new title for the book that's come out of it, and now I'm arguing with publishers who want to give it a third title. So moving around these areas, but I'm going to start by talking a little bit about me and what I do to give this some context. I work for CUP at the University of Brighton. Some of you may know CUP, Community University Partnership Programme. We've now been at Brighton for about 13 years. We had our 10-year anniversary some time ago when we were reviewing where we'd come from and then where we were going to in the future. And then in that interim, since that, we've now got a new senior management at Brighton, and the environment for higher education generally is different, and the environment at Brighton is particularly different. We come out of an era when Brighton took social responsibility very seriously, when David Watson, our former Vice-Chancellor, was speaking on the radio about the social responsibility of universities and was contacted by a philanthropic trust from the US who asked him whether or not he would like to put in a proposal for a business plan for some funding, which was more or less guaranteed to us, providing the business plan was okay, that looked at some of those issues, how a social responsibility played out in universities in the UK. And I'm sure all of you will know, as members of the chair, that the US has a long history of this work. Though really the UK has quite a long history of this work. It ebbs and flows at different times in the history of higher education. But it's been particularly strong in the US, with movements such as service learning, which has been around since the 1970s, had a resurgence at the end of the last millennium, and also in Europe with the science shop movement. And in CUP, we still work very closely with a number of international projects linked closely to both of those movements, both service learning, although we don't call it service learning in the UK. We tend to talk about student community engagement, which engages students working within their local communities as part of their accredited degree and giving them an opportunity to reflect on their own values, the kinds of organisations they might want to work in the future, the values of the different sectors and the different organisations, and how their discipline fits with what they want to do and achieve in the world. And also with the science shop movement in the UK, which places postgraduate students to undertake research with community organisations, civil society organisations as part of their final thesis. So brokering research projects for postgraduates to take on, which give them experience of real consultancy, real world research, but also lets them think about the importance and the role of research and provides research for organisations that they wouldn't be able to otherwise fund. And one of those international projects that we're part of at the moment is pushing what's called RRI. I don't know if you've come across RRI. It's a European initiative standing for Responsible Research and Innovation, looking at the sort of keys around training the next generation of researchers to think about the social responsibility issues of research as a whole and the kind of work that they do. So that's me and what I do at CUP in Brighton. I did my PhD just over 10 years ago now, and I undertook that in Bosnia. It was some years after peace was declared, but there was still quite a fragile peace. And I worked with the University of Milican in Mostar, which was still at that period a divided city. Students wouldn't cross the bridge from east to west. And the university was housed on a former army barracks in what it termed as in exile. It was the Bosniak University. The Croats had taken over the former university premises and the Bosniaks were on the other side of the city, but they were trying to establish a multi-ethnic, multicultural university that welcomed people from all sectors of society. But they found that the majority of their students came from the east of the city and would still not cross the bridge. And at that time in Mostar, there were 2 sets of fire services, 2 sets of security services, 2 universities, 2 hospitals, and in a city that wasn't particularly large, it still operated as 2 cities on either side of the river. So as part of my PhD studies, I did an action research project with the lecturers there, trying to set up community-based activities for students that allowed them to work in civil society organisations in order to encounter other forms of otherness apart from ethnic otherness. So rather than suggesting that they cross the bridge, we looked at problematizing the other generally and giving them opportunities to move outside their comfort zone, to build links with civil society, to raise some of their questions about their own values, about equalities, about their own futures and how they saw the futures and how they saw the futures of the country. After that finished, I was very keen to pursue that area of research in looking at the role of higher education in conflict, but hadn't had the opportunity to do that. My own commitments at Brighton, the difficulty of doing that because of the kind of travel involved, meant that I wasn't able to do it for some time. But in 2015 I applied for a sabbatical period. I was given a 3-month sabbatical, and I spread that over a calendar year between 2015 and 2016 in order to undertake a number of trips to different locations around the world and to look at this in a bit more depth. But before I go into that, let's have a little look at some of the literature on education and conflict. And I think you'll probably, I'm just looking around the room thinking, do I know in this room? You'll probably be quite familiar with some of this, the literature on education and conflict. But there's 3 areas that I want to cite. One is Mary Caldwell, somebody I like a lot, who writes about the new wars and the changing nature of war, and how over the last 40, 50 years since the Second World War, the nature of war has changed as a whole. There's far less interstate conflict around the world. The majority of conflicts are within states. And the reasons for this she sees as political reduction in the size of the state, conflict over resources, growing inequalities, conflict over identity, struggles for power. And she says we need to look at conflict in a different way. The old ways of looking at conflict no longer hold true, and we need to look at the new forms of conflict and how they manifest themselves in the world. Another quite important piece of literature, I think, is The Two Faces of Education, which is a report written by Bush and Saltarelli. It's been picked up by many people since, including Mary Caldwell, who now writes also about the two, and Lynn Davis, who both write about the two faces of education. But that original text highlighted how education could be both a positive and negative force in conflict, equally positive, equally negative, depending on how it manifested itself. So education was not necessarily the cure to conflict, but because of the inequalities and the promotion of particular stereotypes, who had access to education and how education was managed, it could be as much as a cause of conflict as a cure or a resolution to conflict. And then Alan Smith, who is in Belfast, writing in Belfast about education and conflict, and has one of the UNESCO chairships in education and conflict, talks almost entirely about formal education. I've had a number of conversations with him, met him on a number of occasions, but he highlights some of the roles that education can play in addressing conflict, really from a Northern Ireland perspective, but he's done work in other parts of the world as well. And he talks about the role it can play in citizenship, in state building, in reinforcing the responsibilities of young people towards their country, towards the future of their country, in counteracting inequality, in offering diverse forms of identity that are not necessarily ethnic identities. And he talks about the need for conflict-sensitive education. And he challenges segregated schools in Ireland, in the north of Ireland, and talks about the need for a shared educational background, and is part of a movement towards combined schools and joint schools for Protestant and Catholic young people in the north of Ireland. But all of those people really, certainly Bush and Saltarelli and Smith and others who are writing, Davis, who writes on conflict, who's my external examiner, talk about formal education. And there's a very limited, almost non-existent literature on the role that higher education can play in conflict. There's plenty of literature around about the tripartite mission of higher education, about how higher education has core functions of teaching and research, but a third core function or a third mission to engage with the broader society. And we've often argued in CUP that that third mission can only manifest itself if it's embedded within the other two. So we can't really see it as a separate or third leg. But if we're going to have a social responsibility of higher education, that has to be manifested through teaching and research. So we've talked about that on and off in CUP. over time. And there's plenty of literature on that in the UK. David Watson writes about that a lot. Our former Vice-Chancellor Tom Warner writes about the history of higher education and the history of the third mission. I've written stuff about it. And there's also an extensive literature in the US that deals with social responsibility in higher education. But writing about the role of higher education in conflict, there's three people that I want to tell you about straight away, but they really have written minimal stuff, and they're all associated with doctoral or master's study. Somebody called, I think it was Ralph Taylor, it might be Rudolph, I think it was Ralph R. Taylor, wrote his PhD on the role of Queen's University in the Troubles in 1984. And I took myself off to Canterbury one day in the rain to read it. I felt like a real researcher, just driving across the country and waiting for this book that he pulled off the shelf and hadn't been read for 20 years. It was all dusty and musty and written with a typewriter or something. Yeah. It's what real researchers are supposed to do, not just sit down with their laptops. But then when I was later at Queen's and I spoke to some of his former colleagues, they said, oh, don't take him too seriously, you know, we're not quite sure about his conclusions. But anyway, he talked about objectivity in relation to Queen's, and says objectivity can be a reason for not addressing issues because they cannot be addressed objectively. He said at that time it was impossible to look at the Troubles objectively, and so the general choice in Queen's was to ignore it and not to talk about it. And he said even with the new social science courses emerging in Queen's at that time, social science analysis made little difference and people didn't feel able to handle it or to talk about it. But then subsequently I met lecturers who were there at that time and said, yeah, we did talk about it, but it wasn't official, we did it in our own way. But I was quite interested in, I mean, I think that's quite pertinent to us now in the UK and pertinent to academics globally really, as the role that they have and the role that they play with young people in analysing and looking critically at the challenges that their societies are facing at that time. And some universities around the world, as you know, are shut down in periods of conflict, or lecturers are told not to address the conflict because it is too much a diversion from people's studies, it's too inflammatory, too difficult to talk about. And therefore, academics return to very traditional discipline studies rather than looking at the application of those disciplines to society. A much more recent piece of work and a much more extensive literature review is a thesis written by Samson Milton in 2013, who's now gone across to work at Doha. He was in he was in York, but he's now gone to work at the Doha Institute for Peace and Conflict Studies. And he did a study of the role of higher education following conflict in Libya and Iraq, called the Neglected Pillars of Wisdom. And looked at how people hadn't really paid attention to the things that the academy could do in rebuilding a society, in rebuilding a sense of equality post-conflict. And the contribution to peace building, to reconstruction, but also the importance of maintaining academic links across difference. And that's something, again, that's come back in my own studies. The third was a piece written by A.E. Johnson, an American woman, and she did a bit of a study in Kenya and Cote d'Ivoire looking at election conflicts and the role that universities played. And she compared two different universities, one that had had quite close links with the community up until the conflict, and one which had been very isolationist. The campus university had been very separated from the community, possibly a bit more like Sussex, people living on campus away from the city. Whereas the other one had been a bit more like Brighton, embedded in the city, and had strong links with communities. And she said in neither case was either of those attitudes problem-free when the conflict arose. The one that had close links was seen as implicated, and the one that was isolated was not a safe space. People tried to retreat there and felt it would be a safe space to hide, and academics wanted to stay there, but it wasn't a safe space and it was very targeted as being an elitist institution during the conflict. And she was saying that a university is part of society and therefore it can't separate itself from the troubles that society is facing. And that allegiances can backfire on you, as you can be seen to be partisan, but then isolationist principles don't necessarily work either. So those are sort of three different studies of the role of higher education in conflict, but there isn't a whole lot more. There is related literature, but not a whole lot more, that addresses the social responsibility and the role the university can play. So I was given this sabbatical, and I looked at some of the conflicts around the world, those places that I could access. Obviously it would be very difficult to go and take myself off to a place that was in the midst of conflict. If nothing else, the risk assessment of Brighton wouldn't have allowed me to. So I had to go to places that I could visit, places that were open to receiving me, and very often that was places or conflicts where I already had contacts and colleagues, and I already knew they were taking this issue of social responsibility seriously. I decided to start with Bradford, because Bradford's always a good place to go, with the Centre of Peace Studies in Bradford, but they also had a programme for a peaceful city, which was only a city-wide initiative, obviously not a UK-wide initiative, but was set up specifically to address some of the divisions in Bradford that became much more embedded in society after the Bradford riots. And because of the way they work, because they're a unit not dissimilar to CUP, because we knew Professor Jenny Pearce, who used to live in Brighton, and was professor there, because I knew some of the people working there. I thought that would be a good place to start, both to look at their programme for a peaceful city, and also to look at the work that their academics were doing more broadly in conflicts around the world, and to question them about the role of universities. So I started in Bradford, then I went to Belfast, because it isn't too far away, and because there's been quite a lot of activity in Belfast, which meant I could go to Ulster University and to Queen's. And then I went back to Bosnia, because that was where I did my PhD, and then I thought, well, Brighton, Belfast, Bradford, Bosnia, I might as well stay with places beginning with B. No, it didn't work out like that. I mean, it worked out like that, but it wasn't my intention. So then I went to Birzeit University in Palestine, and also to Al-Quds University, where I had contacts, where I knew there was quite a lot of activity. And then finally I went to Burma, or Myanmar, last year, and they're still using both of those names. So those were the places that I did my case study. Now that I'm almost at the point of finalising the book, I've been contacted by an academic from South Africa who's writing about the current troubles in South Africa and the role of students there, and has asked whether he can include a chapter. So I'm going to have a chapter from South Africa too, because I think what's happening in South Africa and the role the universities play is quite an interesting one. But let me try to take you through some of the things that emerged from the different case studies and the different places and examples of each of those. I looked obviously at the different phases of conflict and the role of the academy at those different phases. And I found responses linked obviously to institutions, where the whole institution has taken a particular slant and a particular view. Where individual academics have decided to go out on their own and do something with their own students or with their own research. So there were a number of academics who were involved in policy, and a number of examples drawn from teaching. And because I started off with a real interest in teaching and learning, I'm going to talk a bit about that at the end. And also obviously a number of student-led responses. So I've decided in the end to organise the book around institutional responses, academic-led responses and student-led responses. But also it was important to look at the role that universities can play and do play at different stages in a conflict, and looking at those conflict analyses that talk about the conflict arc, pre-conflict, mid-conflict, post-conflict, the likelihood of interventions being successful. The closer you get to the arc, the higher risk the intervention. The longer it takes to repair relationships. The earlier in the arc that you can intervene, the less damage there is to relationships, the greatest chance of success. So I looked at pre-conflict, mid-conflict, and post-conflict stages. So let's have a chat about some of them. Universities as a site of resistance, in terms of Bush and Saltarelli's two faces of education, there's plenty of examples of that, where students organising for democracy, protesting about what's going on in the country, are a driver or a trigger to conflict surfacing or conflict escalating. Myanmar was two of the strong examples I have in the book, and the students played a really strong role in the protests that led up to the conflict, so much so that universities were banned for a period of time, people were not allowed to congregate, they were sent back to the colleges. Many students went into exile, many students lived as refugees on the Thai border. Some students then went to the States to continue their studies, And when I was there last year, it was at the period when some of those people who were not such young people anymore were returning to have a role in conflict negotiations and in trying to establish peace. So they played a specific role all the way through and were able to talk about how their studies had been the trigger to resistance at the beginning, but how their continued studies while they were in exile had helped them to come round to feeling that they could act as ambassadors in beginning to broker a peace. But we've also seen more recent examples in South Africa I've spoken about already, but also in Tahrir Square in Egypt, which was young people's protest, but strongly organised by the universities, and in China recently. So there's many examples of students playing a pre-conflict role in intervening and causing simmering conflict to erupt through protests and demonstration. And because of the nature of students, because of the idealistic nature of young people, because of the fact that they're together in a group, many of them are willing to take risks and therefore push things further through a protest. University also has a role in pre-conflict stages, in the analysis of conflict. And Kenna Major, who's now working in Bradford, talks a lot about this and how we don't spend enough money or put enough time into thinking about the role that scholars could play in analysing conflicts prior to conflicts erupting, and having a role in advising governments in noticing the trigger points to conflict arising. Developing theoretical frameworks, advising donors. He said scholars understand conflict. We study conflict, we understand the stages of conflict. And particularly within the African universities, he's pushing for academics to put more money into this and more time and more attention into this as an area. Pre or post-conflict, universities have played a role in demonstrating for peace and in brokering peace and in working for peace. And in Mostar, prior to the outbreak of the conflict in the Balkans, the students and the intellectuals, academics, organised a mass, not even a protest, a march, a peace march, in which they joined hands across the bridges. And I thought that was a very powerful symbol, how the universities went out to join hands across the bridges to try and say, we don't need this conflict in our city, we don't want this to happen. I don't know how much you know about the history of Bosnia, but prior to the Balkan conflict, there was a really high incidence of interethnic marriages. More than 50% of marriages were between Serbs and Croats or Serbs and Bosniaks. So many children were the product of interethnic marriages. And there was a strong push, particularly in Mostar, for trying to hold on to what was quite a fragile peace at that time. And it was interesting to be there in the same city 12 years later, 11 years later, when now the universities saw themselves in exile. There was a university on the other side of the bridge, but students were too afraid to cross the bridge and their parents didn't want them crossing the bridge. And there was quite a lot of parental resistance too to the inter-ethnic policy that Cemal Bjelic wanted to establish, because parents were terrified that if their children made friends at the age of 18, 19, 20 with people from another ethnic group, they might marry. They might form strong relationships and they might marry. And some of my colleagues who I worked with there who were children during the conflict and who were now having babies themselves said, I really want to live in peace, I really want to push this policy, I wouldn't want my children marrying someone from the other side because it was just too painful at the time, it was too painful. So there was all that going on underneath. But universities obviously had a role there, and also other universities offer training in peace building, provide work in peace building, and have a strong potential to bring academics together across boundaries and across difference. And I did some work with the British Council in Kashmir year before last, just before I had the sabbatical actually, and some of the academics there were saying, I was on the Pakistan side, and the Pakistani academics were saying, we really feel we should have a role. We would really like to reach out and collaborate with some of the Indian academics on the other side of the line of control. We don't know how to do that. We don't know how to address this with our students, but we feel the university should have a role. And I've just come back last week from Ethiopia, where I'm beginning a new project looking at the relationships between academics between Ethiopia and Eritrea. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Remaining neutral during a conflict. Mary Caldwell talks about zones of civility and spaces where people can come together that are neutral spaces to have difficult conversations. And in some way, that's what Queen's was, except Queen's in the old days tried to inhibit conversation. In current days, and the chapter I have in my book from Queen's is about the use of zones of civility and the importance of them. Because the university now tries to be a space where people can talk about some of those difficult issues. Ulster University has been doing some work with former paramilitaries, bringing them into the university to talk about what they call difficult issues, and so that the university can be presented as a safe space. And one of the roles that the Programme for a Peaceful City played in Bradford was to bring university academics, community members from both sides, into a room to have debate. And they felt that the academics there could add a level of analysis to the conversation that took it away from some of the inflammatory emotions that were on both sides and encourage people to begin to dig deeper into what was going on rather than to have a reactionary response to each other. So during conflict, universities can be used as zones of civility or safe and neutral spaces. That's not always the case, as was the case in the 1980s in the midst of the trouble with Queen's, as is the case in many African universities. People don't want to address these issues, and in order to avoid addressing them, almost shut themselves into very traditional disciplines and very traditional ways of teaching, in which you just look at your discipline rather than its relationship to the broader context. Raising awareness and understanding of students and of local communities through seminars, discussions, and alternative form of media as a form of information. And that relates similarly to the one above, really, and that's the role that Bradford is trying to play. And other universities have been unable to operate normally during conflict, have tried instead to bring students together to talk about difficult issues and examine difficult issues in a room with each other. Last year I also met the president of one of the Nigerian universities who in a course on religious studies had invited Boko Haram to give a presentation. And I really wanted him to write something for me and he said he couldn't do it. It was too sensitive and too difficult. But he said in a city where already a number of our academics and our students have been killed by Boko Haram, we need to give them a platform and a space to at least put their case alongside the case of other people. In Palestine, Birzeit University, don't know how many of you know Birzeit, but it was set up by Gabi Baranki, who set it up particularly in response to the occupation of the Palestinian territories, and in order to provide an education for what he saw was a nation in waiting. So it had a very specific intention in its original mission as it formed itself in relation to the occupation. And during some of the most difficult times, pre the Oslo Agreement, different departments of Birzeit have involved themselves directly in the conflict, almost as service providers at a time when the state was unable to provide services. So Eileen Katab, who's I've had conversations with, who's writing for me, talked about her students taking aid to some of the communities, using healthcare students to provide primary healthcare, dentist students to provide dentistry, agricultural students to provide agricultural advice to some of the local population in periods of conflict when those services weren't available for the Palestinian state. And now that those times are at a different phase, there's still academics working quite closely, particularly around water, access to water, the provision of water, and around legal aid to provide practical help. I think legal aid one takes me to the next slide actually. No, it wasn't that one. Where Al-Quds University, which is based in Jerusalem, where there's a number of house demolitions going on week by week, and people, Palestinians who are unable to afford legal costs to fight a house demolition, can go to the law clinic and get free advice from academics and students who volunteer there. The students do all the legwork of finding, researching the issue. The academics then provide the advice back to people in the city, Palestinians in the city, to give them some neutral advice as to their legal positions regarding their houses. We have law clinics. I think you've got a law clinic at Sussex, and the Innocence Project has got clinics all around the country, or around America, in different places. But the one in Al-Quds particularly, because of the space that it's located in East Jerusalem, and because nobody else is able to provide that advice, is doing quite a lot of work with house demolition. So again, quite an obvious role that university students can play, where they get a chance to use their expertise within the community. Development of citizenship or democracy following conflict as an alternative to ethnic focus or ethnic identity. And I guess that's some of what we were trying to do in Bosnia. And when I was in Bosnia in 2007, 8, 9, it was really interesting. I used to watch bits of Bosnian TV in my room to try and find bits of English news. And every now and then it would be interrupted by a playing of the national Bosnian anthem and the flags, and there would be flags everywhere. Everywhere there was a real push to try and establish a sense of Bosnian identity to overcome some of the ethnic divisions there. And the university was seen as having a role in trying to give a sense of citizenship and encourage people to identify with the state again rather than with former ethnic groups. Capacity building workshops, Ken Amaji talks about that. He's done some interesting work in Sierra Leone, working with security forces. And he says post-conflict, one of the biggest problems are security forces, because people are not dealing with former divisions sensitively enough. The security forces are seen as the enemy because of the role they played during the conflict. And if we're going to change that, we need training workshops, capacity building workshops, to help people to work in a different way. So Sierra Leone is doing some of that. And Amaje again will criticise traditional prestigious universities, saying that they're not sufficiently attuned to the needs of society, that they will try to attract the best students, they will try to focus on, and we talked about this in CUP really, when I've done a number of presentations on behalf of CUP, of looking at what is the role of a university and what's the social responsibility, and is it to give an individual a career, a brilliant career, or is it to address inequalities and address the pressing problems of our time? And Amaje says some of the traditional universities in Africa, some of the African universities, because of their colonial history, have got quite out of touch, but prestigious degree courses that focus on studying a discipline and stick with that in a very safe way, rather than wanting to move to adapt the teaching that they deliver to the needs of society, and that needs to shift if universities are to play a proper role. Research in dealing with the knock-on impact of conflict or occupation, house demolitions, we've talked about that, deforestation, access to water. Universities are microcosms, aren't they? And you have experts from almost every field of life in the university. And so if you look around the Sussex campus, you'll probably find people who could do almost everything, from advising on policy, from carrying out political analysis, from helping people to access water, from medical research, dental care, down to social science analysis of community living. So universities are microcosms, and they are some of the places in which the best expertise exists. So finding a way to mobilise that and linking research in a way that science shops do, in a way that CUP tries to do, linking research to local issues, could unlock real potential to create change at a local level. And that's at all phases of conflict, during conflict, under occupation, and post-conflict, using disciplinary expertise, particularly legal, scientific, or social scientific. So I'm just going to give you a few bit more in-depth examples of some of the pedagogic responses in places that I visited. We've talked about Queen's already, that it remained neutral during the conflict. And interestingly, its neutrality and the way it dealt with widening participation at that time and opened up access to former poorer Catholic students is one of the things they feel has contributed to maintaining a relatively stable peace 20 years on, because there are now Catholics in positions of power because they've had that education that they didn't have before. There we go, we're back again. So sometimes it's the things you least expect that the Academy does that will have an impact sometime on. But also they now have a centre for conflict studies. They've become a centre of expertise. They've begun to reflect on their own history and their role in their own history, and they attract academics from all around the world to look at things that they might now do in their own locations as well as policymakers. So it's become, Belfast has become a bit of a centre of conflict tourism. You can do a black cab visit and see some of the sites of conflict now. And the university is working with that expertise really to try and become a centre and an advisor in different places in its own right, in the same way that Bradford is. The University of Ulster, on the other hand, was more active during the conflict. It was practitioner-focused. It focused on some of the vocational subjects, on training people to work in the local area. And it now has a CPD program bringing opposing hardliners together, really, to look at their past experience. So they're remaining neutral in a different way, and they're talking and bringing in local communities into the university on adult education programs, people who wouldn't otherwise ever come into university or do any form of further study, and hosting these conversations and hosting these movements, they hope, for change to try and deal with some of the most difficult areas of the city where some of the strongest tensions still exist. So they have lectures to give a view on the subject, they have discussions, they try to facilitate discussions between groups, to reinterpret the past, to restory the past in order to move forward. Two examples from Bosnia. One is a MA in peace building that's been set up jointly between, at the moment, Belgrade and Sarajevo. They're hoping that Zagreb will join. They've just completed their first year. They were a year in designing it, and they just completed their first MA, where students study from each country and they move together between the two countries and hopefully between the three countries and the three areas to look at history and to look at peace building and to learn by working together during that period. University of Basel in Switzerland is also involved there as a kind of mediator, negotiator between the three. And then in Sarajevo, different initiatives, usually by individual academics, and this is one that is being started by a friend of mine, a Bosnian woman who's working there now, who was a teenager during the conflicts, who had to be removed from where she was living because it became too dangerous, lived in exile for a while and then went to America to study and then returned, and is now very committed to working for peace within Sarajevo for a stable long-term peace. And she's a foreign language teacher. She speaks excellent English. She studied in America. And she's writing for me, but also thinking and writing in other ways about the role of foreign language in creating spaces for difficult conversations, and how foreign language teachers can then go on to work in different schools, some still segregated schools, but use English and the space that English provides to allow people to have more difficult conversations, to explore difficult issues and difficult identities. And she talks quite a lot about Freire and critical pedagogy and the importance of critical pedagogy in issues of moral responsibility, and feels that her work shows that having a discussion in a third language, you can almost have the space to be another person. So for kids to do that, and for foreign language teachers to do that, they have a particular role and a particular space. And then finally, two examples from Palestine, one from Bir Zayt and one from Al-Quds. BIS 8.1 is the role, which I've talked about a bit already, as service providers during the worst periods. They did quite a lot of work in prisons in BIS 8 with political prisoners, both delivering education programs to prisoners and providing support to prisoners' families. And so they used students to provide support to prisoners' families, talking with them, supporting them, working with them while they were waiting and for cases to be served and waiting to visit their family who were charged with political crimes, but also themselves carrying out education programs, political prisoners whose study was interrupted. And there are a number of academics working at BIS 8 and working in other universities across the Palestinian territories that did quite a lot of their own study in prison in earlier years. And in Palestine they have also a program that was mediated by Bard's College, an American college, with students working as community workers, and they've taken more the sort of neutral stance that enhance the sense of citizenship. Students should work in their communities, support their communities to progress, to deal with local issues rather than focusing on the occupation, focus on notions of citizenship instead. So a bit like Queen's and Ulster really. One's taken a very political stance and one's taken a more sort of citizenship approach to try and encourage collaboration. BIS 8 is a strong defender of the BDS, the boycott, disinvestment and sanctions, whereas Al-Quds say we want to collaborate with Hebrew University, we want our students to meet students from the Hebrew University, to have the best education possible. They've got to use facilities that are available in the Hebrew University, and we're both in Jerusalem, so why shouldn't we be speaking to each other? So one has a more complex view of the difficulties and the need for dialogue, the other quite a hardline view of separation. And interesting, of course, conversations between the two of them in occupied territories. So what is a conflict-sensitive education? I started off by talking about Alan Smith's notion that we should be providing a conflict-sensitive education in times of conflict. What does that mean for higher education? Advantages, obviously, of zones of civility. And if you maintain a neutral stance, the universities are more likely to be able to remain open. Otherwise, universities are often closed within conflict periods because they're too dangerous to continue. Periods after conflict may allow for a more sensitive analysis of different positions, and interesting that some of the former students who were very radical, who were in exile, are now coming back and holding discussions with the military to try and progress the peace, and are foregrounding that, whereas previously they'd been in opposition. Universities as service providers can have a role in student education and community support, but what do we teach our students, and how do we teach our students to view a conflict? Is it our responsibility to maintain neutrality? Is it our responsibility to be honest about our own views and our own values in those contexts? And then the notion that conflict is not necessarily negative. That if there's going to be change, as in resistance, conflict has to happen. And the Lederach conflict analysis, looking at conflict as transformation, could be useful as a way of viewing events with young people and helping them to think through the trajectory and where they might be going. Just a couple of things to mention. This is a bit new, so I can't really talk about it yet. But just come back from Ethiopia, and a friend of mine's in Eritrea this week to talk about the potential for a joint university project between Asmara and Bahadar in Ethiopia, or possibly with contacts from Addis Ababa, and what scholars can do to address existing tensions and separations between the two countries at the moment. And from my conversations in Eritrea, there was a real willingness to talk on behalf of the universities. A bit more than that, a real interest in reaching out on behalf of the universities. The Higher Education Ministry in Ethiopia has already urged universities to play a greater role in civil society and in partnering with civil society. And a number of academics I spoke to said, at this point, we can't wait for politicians to do something. The way forward has to come from scholars, and we have the option of meeting virtually, if not face-to-face, and that's a good place for dialogue. And then finally, the Routledge book, which will come out next year, They want to call it peace building and resistance, and I kind of like to have the word conflict in there, so I'm still arguing with them about that. But it'll be in that series, so that's what you would learn when it comes. So that's 50 minutes, that's pretty much to the dot.